Welcome back. It is day one, week four. Day one, week four. And we are in chapter 13. We are in chapter 13. Today's conversation is going to be something that we probably know, but maybe something we haven't really thought about. And that is this idea of starting a new career. And we all know what it feels like to be the new guy on the job. We all know what it feels like to, or we will soon know what it feels like to be the new kid on the block, right? A lot of people suffer from what we call imposter syndrome. Anybody ever heard of that, imposter syndrome? I know a lot of people use that term. Yeah. And it all centers around you not feeling like you're you're up to the task, or you're in a job, you're in a career, you could have the situation that you want, but for whatever reason you feel as if you're not fully capable, right? And that's what they call imposter syndrome. And so maybe on your first day on the job, there may be some things that you're not sure of. You may feel like, oh my goodness, they're going to realize I don't know anything. I've been there 1,000 times. I've switched careers enough to tell you that it's okay, because even people that have been on the job for a long time don't know everything, right? So you're not required to know everything. You're not required to be this super competent person when you start a job, even though we all want to project that. So day one, of course, is going to be what? It's going to be very overwhelming when you start that new job, because you're going into a new career. It's not even just a new job, which is super, even more, you know, nerve wracking, because you're starting a new job and a new career. Like, I get it. I get it. And so it could be very overwhelming. You're walking in there. Everybody knows that when you do start this new job, you have to do a lot of, onboarding is what we call it. And what I want to focus on when you start this new job and new career is questions, asking questions. If anyone has ever been in HR, or you know someone in HR, or you've had to deal with HR, we all know that the most time you get with an HR person is when you start and when you leave, right? Other times they barely have time for you. I want you to take your time with that HR and ask questions, as you're doing that onboarding paperwork. Don't rush through that. Any lingering questions that you may have left over from your interview process, maybe you didn't get that question answered around overtime. Maybe you're someone that really wants overtime because it's important for your family dynamic. Maybe you may be someone that don't want a lot of overtime, and I would argue that you probably want to ask that even before you start the job. You know, does the job require a lot of overtime? All of you are in careers that could go over 40 or not, but most of them could go over 40. Is that something that you're interested in? That's something that may want to clarify. You may want to clarify obvious things like healthcare benefits and things of that nature, but you may also want to clarify really simple stuff like, where do I park and what badge do I have? Like, I'm gonna tell you, sometimes your supervisor and your coworkers, they don't really want to have to answer that stuff for you. Like, where do we park and where do we sign in and where do we get this? Like, that's something that you should be asking during orientation. So all those lingering questions that you may have, make sure you ask them during orientation. Of course, when you start, there's going to be a lot of paperwork, your I-9, your W-4, your benefits forms. Don't just sign those things willy-nilly. And I'm just telling you because not only because I've done it, but because, I've spent some time in HR. And once you do it, it can be a headache to have to go back and redo it. But here is where you want to spend that time and make sure that you fully understand what that institution is offering you. Maybe, for example, you took a job lower pay than what you would have taken because you were under the impression that your benefits started day one, or maybe you were under the impression that the family benefit cost a certain amount, and you really didn't understand that, initially. Take your time to find out what is what. Like, you don't want to have to go back and, and once you do your benefits, that goes for 12 months. And, we all know that you can't make those changes after the fact. And then only to find out that they're way more expensive than what you thought. That's happened to me. And the pay and the amount that was coming out was horrendous. Like, I had a coworker that she was paying like $600 a month for healthcare. And, I'm like, $600 a month for healthcare. And, so pretty much, a large portion of her paycheck was just going to pay for healthcare, so it's important that you ask the right questions and really understand what it is that you're getting. Definitely know where you're supposed to be on day one. Oftentimes, because sometimes you do have to do paperwork, you have to do orientation. For those of you that may have off-site jobs, like maybe you're at a construction site, if you're electric or HVAC, but maybe for those first 3 days, that's not where you're going to be. So make sure you ask, like, okay, where is orientation going to be held? When is orientation going to be held? Is there going to be an orientation? Where should I be on day one? And obviously, once you ask what time too, because your job day may start at 8 o'clock, but maybe the orientation day one starts at 9 o'clock. That's happened to me. You're just assuming you're supposed to be somewhere at 8 o'clock because that's when your normal day will start. During that first week, everybody knows it's never what it's supposed to be. You want to make a good impression. How many of us have started a job and you see stragglers, lost, confused? Maybe we were a straggler, lost, confused. We don't know where we're supposed to be. We didn't know what time we were supposed to be there. It's like, do you really want that drama on your first day, your first week? Like, why even start out that way? You got people looking at you like, oh, look at this lost and confused person, right? So you want to make sure that you're on time. You want to make sure that where you're supposed to go. I remember when I started the job, the CEO was doing his welcome presentation on day one, and you had people rushing into the conference room because they were lost and confused. It was so embarrassing. And during that time too, like, you're going to be meeting all your other people that are starting, that are new. You may be in a orientation or a briefing with, people from different departments. So you got to meet and greet and do all kinds of stuff, right? You just want to be settled. Nothing says starting on the right foot like being on time, being at the right place where you're supposed to be, being able to greet people, be calm, get your coffee and relax. So, make sure that you are on time. Does that make sense? All right. So that's why it's important to ask those questions with HR. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ahmed.
I just wanted to say, I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking, but talking about the imposter syndrome, going back to that a little bit. Um, I will tell you, I definitely felt exactly what you were saying, and I'm glad you talked about that because it's not because I'm in the electrical. I went to SCC for electrical, and I'm not saying that like, oh, like I don't know anything, of course, but like it's definitely nerve wracking sitting there thinking about like, oh, are they gonna expect me to know more than I know, all this stuff, and it's I know exactly what you're saying when you say that, so I'm glad you covered that, and I know probably other people feel the same way about their field, so.
Absolutely. And it's okay. Listen, I feel that way. I'll be starting a new career, so to speak. Like I think I told some of you guys that I'm in law school, which is crazy. I know. I can't stop going to school. I just like torturing myself. And I'm definitely going to be concerned, like, can you imagine? Like, I'm going to be like, I don't know nothing. But, it's par for the course. Like, as long as you're in your career, there's always going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be times where you're going to be the new kid on the block. You don't know anything. But the good thing is, as long as you are stay proactive, you're going to learn on the job, and nothing is as bad as it is in our mind, right? Our mind always plays tricks on us. We always think that is worse than what it actually is, right? Everybody's in the same boat. You look to your left and you look to your right, and everybody's thinking the same thing, right? Now, few tips. None of you guys will be remote workers, technically, probably. However, there may be times where you don't have like a standard office, so that could also be the case. Or maybe you guys are, if you get hired by a large company, they may even do orientation remotely because maybe your team may be going to different work sites, right? So for those of us that it may matter, there are some tips and tricks for people that are remote workers, right? So I'm a remote worker, obviously. And even in my consulting work, I work as a remote worker, and it is good. Like people always say, like if you do remote work, or if let's say you only go to construction sites and maybe you just go to your house to the construction site and you don't really go to like a corporate environment or like a day-to-day job, and maybe you have to go home and use a laptop and do some work, that may apply to some of you. They always talk about having a space in your home where you can work, quietly without, children around or whatever like that. I mean, it don't always work, y'all. Even for me, it doesn't work, but we'll try it. It is good to have some type of routine, both for your family and for you. Like if you happen to be that person that gets hired by some type of, organization where they do project work, you go out to the site, you got to come back home and do paperwork. Establishing that routine is really good, with your family, so they know, okay, mommy, daddy, whatever, when they come home, they got to, decompress. They're not done working, they still need an hour to do their paperwork or whatever it is that you need to do. Like it's really important that, you try to establish that routine. I would also say, if for any of you where you do have that situation and you still have to engage with your company, that you have effective communication. Y'all have seen in the news this whole drama with remote workers, and like, oh my God, people don't work if they're remote. Like, I don't know where that came from. I honestly think it's a generational thing. If you ask me, I feel like my generation right there was on the cusp of people that really understood remote work, like the baby boom generation, i.e., the sorry to say, but the Trump, Biden, those really older people, they come from very, 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 very traditional environments. They do. I'm not trying to age shame, but they do. And so they don't really understand it. Like I did not grow up on technology, but I definitely worked with technology. Like my first job was in the Army, and that's why I learned how to use a computer, and that was back in 1992, something like that. So, we started out, when the computer generation was happening. So my career, grew up with technology. So I feel like Generation Xers, we kind of fall in between both. We understand both. Now, the younger generations, you guys know that, a lot of work can be done remotely, especially paperwork and administrative type stuff, right? But I definitely feel that that is a generational type thing. But even with that, my point with communication is that if you have to engage remotely with your company, make sure you just have effective communication. Make sure people understand when you're on, when you're not on, when it's good to call, when it's not good to call. Like, set time with that, because if you have to do any type of remote work and you're not upfront about when you're available, because a lot of times when you do remote work, I don't know if any of you have ever done it, people think you don't clock out. Like, I've had people reach out to me, a crazy amount of hours on the weekends. They think, well, okay, if you work remotely, you're always available. And sometimes when you do work remotely, give me a thumbs up if you've ever done it before. You don't even know how to clock out. Who took control? Don't do that. Okay. You don't even know how to clock out. So that can be crazy too, right? Because, I thought I took that off. Yeah, please don't play around with the PowerPoint. But and it's hard when you work remotely. So that's crazy. So now, like I stated, with the training, you know, it typically is going to be in some type of group, especially once you get past the paperwork. Then you may have breakout sessions when you go and you're starting your training, right? And it could be one-on-one sometimes, after your group stuff, but most times it's going to be in some type of group setting, right? So make sure that if you have that time, that you are asking questions. I know a lot of times we're so shy about that, because your supervisor, or maybe whoever's training you, sometimes they go too fast, sometimes they go slow enough. Sometimes when you're in a group, you're too shy to ask. But those are your times to ask questions, because you get what they call that honeymoon phase, right? What, maybe the first month, and then they kind of expect you to be an expert. You're like, hey, with my friend, what happened? It went from being new to being an expert. How did that happen? So when you're doing that, those trainings, I say take notes. If they allow you to even record, I would say record, you know, because sometimes they talk so much, they talk so fast, they talk about a lot of different things, and you may not remember. So I would ask, hey, is it okay if I record you? Because I want to make sure I understand. You know, trying to take notes, can be very, flabbergasting, because they're talking really fast, or maybe, they go back and forth over different topics and you get lost. Now you're frustrated. But I think it's okay for you to ask a lot of questions, record if you can. Now's your time. I'm telling you, now's your time. They're probably going to give you a tour. Sometimes they may give you a tour of corporate office, give you a tour of the offsite, onsite, wherever you're going to be. If they don't go over something, ask. Like, if they skipped over something, because people are human, they don't do it on purpose. Make sure you ask if they skip over something. Hey, they may say, we're going to discuss these 4 things, and then they only discuss the 3. Make sure you ask that question. Like, don't be shy, because they may think after the training that they did do something and they didn't. And then they're going to be looking at you like, why didn't you ask? Go ahead, Ian.
Another thing is that sometimes people will be checking to see how much you know, and they want to see if you're willing to correct a mistake.
Yeah, you never know, right? So, I think too that I would say sometimes, they don't know how much you know, right? So they could just assume, oh, okay, they already know this, so I'm just going to skip over it, and I would, you never know. Your question could be also be somebody else's question. So that's why I say ask on behalf of yourself, hey, but ask on behalf of the group, because you never know who else may have that question. Other things that you want to ask for, chapter third ask about rather chapter 13 discusses, they talk about, this checklist you can use, right? For people, all employees, if you're remote, if you're on site, these different questions that you may want to ask. So I would take some time to read in chapter 13, because it may be something that you like, oh yeah, I forgot to ask this and I forgot to ask that. And it does get a little embarrassing if you have to go back and ask. So be selfish, don't be shy, is all I'm going to tell you. We've all been there. Now, when do you update your information? Most of us have done our LinkedIn profiles. I saw them, they're looking good. When do you go in and say, oh, I got a new job? You do you. I'm going to tell you what I do. This is not right. This is not wrong, whatever. I tend to wait 90 days. Now, you may want to wait 30 days, 60 days. You may want to do it on the first day. Me, like, I got to make sure that it is the right job, right? So for me, it's going to be 90 days. I want to make sure I'm going to be on this job, or at least until I'm comfortable before I start updating. But you do want to update your profile and let people know that you have started a new career. Now, remember, this is not social media. This is professional. So you're updating your LinkedIn profile. So it's like adding a new skill set. You're adding a new company. That's good, because people will say, oh, this person works for Duke Energy, or this person works for whatever. Let me connect with them. People will connect with you based on where you work. And that's good, because now you're building your network, right? So you do want to update your job because you want to start building your network. And sometimes recruiters, they'll look for that information. Let's say you're working for Duke Energy and maybe you've been working there for a year and a recruiter has a new position, maybe at a different company. They're going to do like a Google search, a search on LinkedIn to see, okay, whose profile showcases certain things. And that's how you get job offers too. So yes, you do get job offers off of LinkedIn. Now, some people say not as much as they would like, but you do get job offers off of LinkedIn. So that's another reason why you want to make sure that your profile stays updated. Sometimes you'll get people that reach out to you too, for whatever reason, because of what you put on your profile. So that's another way, one, to build your network, and two, to have people reach out to you because your profile is updated. So you want to update that. When you update it, it's up to you. I'll leave that to you. Performance evaluations. This is a big deal. Who's ever had a performance evaluation? Once you start your career, this is a big deal. A lot of big companies, this is their formal way of keeping track of how well you are doing something. Now, I say that because in a traditional environment, let's say we're going to be with this company 10 years. Let's say back in Biden and Trump's day, it was 30 years, but I'm just going to say 10 years. It's more like 5 years. We all know how that goes, right? But let's just pretend. How do you go from being an entry person to being a senior person to being a supervisor, manager, director, all those different things? A lot of that is based on your performance evaluation and how well you do. Some companies have very, very formal performance evaluations. Others have, oh my God, we got to turn in this paperwork and do this evaluation. So let's throw something together. I pray you're not in that type of company. I pray you're not, but we've all been there. But the performance evaluation is technically a formal process that is designed to evaluate your work, right? It's designed to evaluate your work. And you want to make sure that that evaluation is done correctly. Now, you may say, well, how do I make sure my evaluation is done correctly? Well, what is supposed to happen, and I'm going to give the most formal thing that's supposed to happen. When you start a job, they should give you a set of objectives. It should not just be your job description. They should say, you know, if you had a really, 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 really good company, they should say, hey, look, these are our strategic objectives for the year. Here's how your position fits into that. Here are the objectives that your position, your team is supposed to meet. This is what we're going to evaluate you on. 6 months into it, they should have some type of midpoint evaluation, but you should know exactly what you're going to be graded on. Why do you think it's so important for you to know in advance what you're going to be evaluated on? Like, why is that important? Anybody want to tell us? And I'll keep talking, if I don't hear anyone raise their hand, see anyone raise their hand. But why is that so important? Like, can you imagine going through the whole year and then they decide to do an evaluation on you? Go ahead, Ian.
Because you want to make sure that you're doing the work you're actually supposed to be doing instead of getting handed someone else's work.
Exactly. And also, and also, you know, it is so unfair to get to the end of the year and then someone says, oh, you know what, Amy, I was really hoping that you would have taken initiative on that project that we gave you 7 months ago. And you're like, what, girl? Like, you could have told me that 7 months ago. Like, nothing is more horrible than you going a whole year thinking that you've done great. And then for some supervisor to, have their own personal view about how well you have done and give you a bad review. Anybody ever seen that happen before, whether it's you or someone else? I think that is the most horrendous way. That is the most horrendous way to treat an employee. Employees should know how they're being evaluated on the front end, and they should know throughout that year how well they're doing. So by the end of the year, there should be no surprises. Like if you work at a really good company, like I said, they're telling you what they expect at the beginning of the year. They're giving you objectives. Yes, you're doing your job description, but you may have 3 or 4 objectives that they want you to meet. Like we want you to see at least 50 customers this year. You're working on this project. It's very important that you get a 95% rate of, positive rate for whatever, however they're evaluating you throughout the year. You should know exactly how you're going to be evaluated. So at the end of the year, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? That's a great company, and so that's what I mean by managing up, because what you can do is if they don't say anything, you ask, hey, so is there a performance evaluation process? What are we going to be evaluated on this year? You take control of that, because what you're saying is, listen, my friend, you're not just going to give me any type of grade at the end of the year, because that is permanent. And sometimes there are companies that will say to you, can you show us your evaluation from your other job? And you're like, that piece of crap paper that they did that didn't mean anything. Can you imagine that? Right? Anybody ever been in that situation before? Like that could be a horrible, horrible situation. All right. So let's switch gears in our last little section and talk about workplace etiquette. Let's talk about workplace etiquette. We talked about etiquette when we started, because we talked about network etiquette, proper etiquette when you're out and about. But what really is workplace etiquette? You guys see here on the screen where it talks about if you're on the phone, using headphones, digital stuff, maintaining a clean environment. All of this sounds very obvious, right? Right, that's obvious. How many of us haven't worked in environments where this did not, you had a coworker where this was an issue? Anybody, or is it just me? Even when did someone take my lunch out of the refrigerator? Anybody ever been in that situation? Exactly, right. All of us have been in those situations before, right? So we don't want that drama. Like, you don't want to be that guy, right? All right. Now, workplace safety is also a big, big issue for a lot of you, right? Workplace safety is a huge issue. I am sure your training, I am sure your training is going to have a lot of workplace safety, every last one of you, because they want to avoid all these different things as it relates to workplace safety, because that could affect their workforce. So just know workplace safety training is going to be ongoing, OSHA standards, all those different things, right? So make sure that you are aware of workplace safety and what that entails, and that you are going to get a lot of that. If you work in an environment, ergonomics, this is really just for those of us that work in administration. You don't have to worry too much about ergonomics, but people, believe it or not, don't laugh, guys. Believe it or not, don't laugh. But people do get hurt working at their desk. Um, they get what we call carpal tunnel. That's people that type a lot and they risk. Anybody ever heard of carpal tunnel? That is a thing. I don't want there to be a lot of jokes with that, but people do get hurt, working at their desk. But you may have other types of issues, than that. Go ahead, Ian.
I actually do want to specify in some cases of carpal tunnel, it has involved where the muscles tensed up so much that they ripped the tendons in someone's wrist.
Exactly. I actually had carpal tunnel myself, um, a couple of years ago. All right, so let's get to this last thing here. Here's your live session question. Here's your live session question. What is your biggest first date anxiety? I know, like, we really want to think about that. But what is your biggest first date anxiety? And I'm just going to go ahead, Ian, but I'm going to give you guys a second to write that down. What is your biggest first date anxiety?
Okay, yeah, that is the daily question.
Yes, sir.
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, what is your biggest first date anxiety? All right, guys. So remember, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now because I want to just remember.